Volume 1, Chapter 12, Roman's General Recital. The sun had dipped low, casting the sky in shades of lavender and orange as the team loaded the last of their gear into the pink trailer. Kevin stretched, his arms aching from the day's labor, and glanced toward the horizon. A white SUV pulled into view, dust swirling in its wake, and Kevin squinted as it approached. Roman straightened from his crouch by the equipment, his expression brightening. "That'll be a Vigdor," Roman said, brushing off his hands. The SUV parked, and out stepped a Vigdor Lieberman, a man whose reputation preceded him in Israel. He was tall and solidly built, with a presence that exuded both authority and ease. He carried several bags of takeout, and even before he'd reached them, the warm, spiced aroma hit Kevin's nose like a gust of pure temptation. Kevin's stomach growled audibly. "Stop talking and give food," he thought, glancing at Nick, who was sniffing the air like a bear catching the scent of honey. "Gentlemen," a Vigdor greeted, his voice deep and hearty. "Good work today. I brought you something special. You've earned it." The men gathered around as a Vigdor set the bags down on the trailer's tailgate. The scents of roasted lamb, garlic, cinnamon, and herbs wafted upward, mingling with the faint, lingering smell of sweat and desert dust. Roman peeked into one of the bags, his face lighting up. "Is that Makluba?" Roman asked, barely containing his excitement. A Vigdor nodded with a smile. "And shawarma hummus, stuffed vine leaves, enough to feed an army." Kevin leaned closer, his mouth watering. He thought he caught a hint of sumac and freshly baked pita. His brain repeated the same thought in a loop. "Please, for the love of everything holy, stop talking and let us eat." A Vigdor opened one of the containers, releasing a cloud of steam fragrant with cinnamon and nutmeg. "First, though," he said, his tone turning serious, "I want to congratulate you. Your work is already yielding results." Roman's brows lifted in curiosity. Nick, crouched by the food, straightened up, his large hands hovering protectively near the nearest container. "Results? What kind?" A Vigdor's expression hardened slightly, though his tone remained warm. "The GPR units you installed have identified multiple tunnels. Some are dormant, but one in particular is showing signs of active digging." Nick's face broke into a satisfied grin. "Yes, is good. I like." Kevin smirked, suppressing a laugh. Nick's simplicity often felt like a refreshing counterbalance to the weight of the situations they found themselves in. A Vigdor gestured to Roman. "The military has been monitoring that tunnel since yesterday. The data your units provide is precise and invaluable. Tomorrow, they'll act on this intel. I can't share all the details, but know this: what you're doing isn't just about archaeology. You're helping ensure security. Lives are safer because of this work." Roman nodded solemnly, his hands resting on his hips. "Good. That's good to hear." Kevin, chewing on the information, glanced at Nick, who nodded with an unusual sense of gravity. "We're happy to help," Kevin said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. A Vigdor's expression softened, and he reached for the takeout bags. "All right, enough of the heavy stuff. You've earned this meal. Enjoy it and get some rest. Tomorrow, the work continues." The men wasted no time, tearing into the feast with enthusiasm. Kevin grabbed a piece of tender lamb wrapped in warm pita and stuffed with fresh parsley and pickles, the first bite sending a rush of flavors through his mouth. The tang of the pickles balanced the smoky meat perfectly. Nick devoured a vine leaf stuffed with spiced rice and ground meat, muttering between bites, "Good food." "Very good." Roman dipped pita into hummus, the creamy texture complemented by the slight tang of lemon and garlic. He sighed contentedly. As they ate, the group's mood lightened, the exhaustion of the day temporarily forgotten. Kevin glanced at Vigdor, who leaned against the trailer, watching them with a faint smile. "Thanks for this," Kevin said, raising a piece of shawarma. "I don't think I've ever appreciated a meal this much." Vigdor chuckled. "Good food has a way of making everything else feel manageable. And you've earned it." The desert wind picked up, carrying the lingering warmth of the day into the cooler night. As the men ate and swapped stories, Kevin found himself struck by a strange sense of gratitude for the work, for the food, and for this unexpected team that had somehow become a kind of family out here in the middle of nowhere. The warmth of the meal lingered as the group packed up, the sun fully surrendered to the horizon. The desert cooled quickly, the crisp air carrying the faint scent of olive trees and dust. Vigdor stood, brushing crumbs from his hands, his expression shifting from relaxed to purposeful as he turned to Roman. Roman, Avigdor said, his tone measured but firm. I'll need you with me for the meeting with the generals tonight. It's important they hear directly about the GPR data. Roman straightened instinctively, his hand reaching to secure his tablet. Though he gave a quiet nod, Kevin noticed the subtle shift in his expression, resolve mingled with tension. Nick raised an eyebrow, his large hands folding across his chest. Without much fanfare, Avigdor led Roman to the waiting SUV. Kevin caught Roman's brief glance back, a flicker of unease in his eyes. The drive to the military base was quiet, the hum of the SUV blending with the rhythmic thud of tires over uneven road. Roman sat in a passenger seat, tablet on his lap, occasionally swiping through the GPR data, his face illuminated by its glow. Avigdor, at the wheel, exuded calm. His eyes stayed fixed on the road, but his presence filled the vehicle, a quiet reminder of his authority. Roman took a deep breath, his mind running through the numbers. He knew the GPR data backwards and forwards, but presenting it to a room full of generals? That was a different beast entirely. He tightened his grip on the tablet, willing his nerves to steady. The base came into view, its sharp lines of concrete and steel lit by floodlights. Soldiers moved efficiently along the perimeter, their shadows cutting across the vast courtyard as they passed between buildings. The SUV slowed at the gate, the soldiers stepping forward to inspect their IDs. Avigdor handed over his credentials with the ease of someone accustomed to such protocols. The soldier's gaze lingered on Roman, who felt the weight of scrutiny even as he remained silent. After a brief moment, the soldier nodded and waved them through. Inside, the air was starkly different from the cool desert outside. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, the corridors echoing with clipped voices and measured footsteps. Roman followed Avigdor down a long hallway lined with photographs of military operations, each frame a reminder of the stakes. As they neared the conference room, Avigdor glanced over his shoulder, his voice low. Stick to the facts. They're already on edge about the tunnel intel, and they'll be looking for holes in the data. Be clear. Be confident. Roman nodded, though his stomach tightened at the thought. The heavy oak doors loomed ahead, their presence as imposing as the men waiting behind them. Avigdor pushed the doors open, stepping inside with the assuredness of a man who belonged. Roman followed, his shoulders squared as he scanned the room. Around the large table sat a group of generals, their sharp uniforms adorned with rows of medals. Their gazes turned to him, assessing and unreadable. Avigdor motioned for Roman to sit, then addressed the room. Gentlemen, thank you for making time tonight. Roman here will walk you through the latest findings from the GPR installations. The data speaks for itself. Roman swallowed hard, standing to connect his tablet to the display screen. As the map of the Gaza border appeared, he took a steadying breath, pushing past the nerves to focus on what mattered, the truth in the data and the lives it could save. The high-security conference room buzzed with quiet intensity, the muted hum of the projector filling the air as Roman connected his tablet to the display. The illuminated map of the Gaza border sprang to life on the screen, glowing red lines tracing the network of tunnels beneath the landscape. Around the table, Israeli military commanders, their uniforms pressed and adorned with medals, sat rigidly, their eyes locked on the map. Finance Minister Avigdor Lieberman stood to the side, arms crossed, his presence commanding without a word. Roman cleared his throat, his fingers trembling slightly as he tapped on his tablet. These, Roman began, his accent soft but his voice steady, are the latest scans from NEL's ground-penetrating radar units deployed over the last 3 days. The GPR data indicates multiple tunnels, many abandoned. However, he paused, tapping to zoom in on a specific area. Here, Sector 7. This tunnel shows signs of active excavation. Based on the readings, it's large enough to transport supplies or weapons. The room stirred, a few generals exchanging sharp glances. Major Yael, seated near the front, leaned forward, her brows furrowed. How recent is this data? Just hours ago, Roman replied, glancing at Avigdor for reassurance. The equipment sends updates in real time to our secure network. The excavation activity is unmistakable, consistent vibrations, loose soil movements. It's happening now. Avigdor stepped forward, his tone cutting through the room like a blade. This isn't speculation. After last night's missile barrage from Iran, we know our enemies are testing our defenses. The Iron Dome shields us from aerial threats, but these tunnels bypass it entirely. If they're actively expanding this network, we have no choice but to act. The generals murmured among themselves, the gravity of the situation settling over the room. Major Yael spoke again, her voice sharp. Excavation teams can be ready within hours. What about potential resistance? Roman gestured to another section of the map, where faint outlines of buildings and roads appeared above the tunnels. Our scans indicate civilian structures in proximity. Resistance is possible, but the tunnel's depth suggests we can isolate it without immediate surface conflict. Avigdor nodded, picking up from Roman seamlessly. The goal is precision. These tunnels are lifelines for our enemies. If we cut them off, we weaken their ability to strike and to smuggle weapons into our borders. A grizzled general with a silver mustache leaned back in his chair, his arms folded. Dawn, he said after a pause. We move at dawn. The teams will have cover, and the light will be in our favor. The room quieted as the decision sank in. Major Yael gave a brisk nod. Agreed. We'll brief the teams immediately. Avigdor glanced at Roman, a hint of approval in his expression. Prepare your full report for transmission to the field commanders. They'll need every detail. Roman exhaled quietly, his shoulders relaxing as he disconnected his tablet. The room began to clear, the generals rising with purpose, their conversations already turning to logistics. Avigdor placed a firm hand on Roman's shoulder as they followed the others out. You did well, Avigdor said quietly. This will make a difference. Roman nodded, the weight of the moment pressing down on him even as a flicker of pride stirred. Tomorrow, the dawn would bring more than light. It would bring action. At dawn, the desert air was cool, a brief reprieve before the day's inevitable heat. Sergeant David led his unit toward one of the flagged tunnel sites, their boots crunching softly against the sand as the first light crept over the horizon. The horizon glowed with soft hues of orange and gold, casting long shadows across the landscape. The soldiers gathered in a loose circle around the entrance to the site, their rifles slung over their shoulders, their faces resolute but marked by the weight of the moment. The flagged coordinates led to a subtle depression in the earth, barely distinguishable from the surrounding terrain but unmistakable to trained eyes. David stepped to the center, removing his cap and bowing his head for a moment. The soft hum of a nearby GPR unit, still monitoring the ground beneath their feet, was the only sound cutting through the stillness. Above them, the sky transitioned from deep purple to pale blue as the sun edged higher, promising a scorching day ahead. Brothers, he said, his voice steady, before we step into the unknown, we pray. We ask God to guide us, to protect us, and to give us the strength to defend our homeland. The men bowed their heads, murmuring softly as David began a traditional Jewish prayer. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, we ask for your protection as we carry out this mission. Bless our hands to act with courage, our hearts to act with mercy, and our minds to act with wisdom. Shield us as you have shielded your people throughout history, and bring us back safely to our families. The soldiers echoed a solemn amen, their voices a quiet harmony against the desert wind. As they lifted their heads, their resolve was palpable. David donned his cap, his voice firm. All right, team. Private Avi, you're scanning. Corporal Ben, you're on point. The rest of you, keep formation tight. Stay sharp and watch for anything unusual. Let's move. The squad descended into the exposed tunnel in single file, their boots crunching softly on loose gravel. The oppressive darkness seemed to wrap around them, thick and all-consuming, broken only by the ghostly green glow of their night vision goggles. Each man's breath was controlled, measured, yet the faint rise and fall of their shoulders betrayed the tension thrumming through the group. Avi adjusted the strap of his gear, his hand brushing the cold steel of his rifle. His heart thudded in his chest like a slow, steady drumbeat, each beat echoing in his ears. Beside him, Ben wiped at the sweat trickling down his temple, muttering a quiet curse into his calm. The smell was the first thing to really hit them. Damp earth, sharp and metallic, mingling with the sour stench of decay. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped rhythmically, each drop amplified in the eerie quiet. Stay sharp, David's voice crackled softly through their comms, a low rasp in the silence. Eyes on your sectors. Avi scanned the tunnel ahead, his flashlight off, relying instead on the glowing shades of green that painted his vision. The air was cooler here, almost refreshing against the sweat gathering under his helmet, but it clung to his skin with an uncomfortable dampness. Each step echoed faintly, a haunting reminder of the confined space and their vulnerable position. The group halted as David raised a fist, signaling for silence. They stood still, their breath shallow, ears straining for any sound beyond their own. Avi's fingers tightened around his rifle as his eyes darted to the walls, noting the jagged patterns where the tunnel had been hastily carved. His stomach tightened. This was no ordinary dig. The faint hum of the scanning equipment broke the silence. Avi crouched low, activating the device. The screen flickered to life, its soft glow casting shadows on his gloved hands. He scanned the area ahead, watching the lines dance and shift on the monitor. "Nothing yet," he whispered. "Just more dirt and rocks." "Good," Ben muttered, shifting his weight and adjusting his grip on his rifle. "Means we're not about to walk into." A sudden flicker of orange light ahead froze them in place. David raised his fist again, his voice calm but urgent in their ears. "Hold. Visual ahead." Low light. The squad crouched low, rifles raised, their focus sharpened. Avi strained his eyes, his breath hitching as he caught the faint glow again. The flicker resolved into the unmistakable spark of a lighter. The faint sulfuric scent of cigarette smoke drifted toward them, cutting through the tunnel's earthy stench. "Targets," David murmured through the comm 3. 10 meters ahead. "Keep it quiet." Through his goggles, Avi could make out the shapes now. 3 figures leaned casually against the rough walls, cigarettes dangling from their mouths, their rifles slung lazily over their shoulders. They looked relaxed, smug even, their muted voices bouncing softly off the tunnel walls. David's voice crackled again, firm and commanding. "Flashbang ready." Avi's pulse quickened as he reached for the grenade at his vest. His fingers felt clammy against the cool metal. He glanced at Ben, who gave him a curt nod, his own rifle trained on the figures ahead. "Mark." The grenade sailed through the air, its metallic body spinning end over end before landing near the unsuspecting insurgents. The tunnel erupted in a blinding flash and a deafening roar, the sound reverberating off the walls and shaking loose small clumps of dirt. The insurgents shouted in confusion, their voices panicked and disoriented. "Move!" David barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. The team surged forward, their boots pounding against the ground. 2 of the insurgents scrambled for their rifles, but the squad moved faster. Ben's rifle but cracked against the first man's shoulder, sending him sprawling. Avi took the second with a precise shot to the knee, the man collapsing with a cry of pain. The third insurgent, blinded and dazed, dropped his cigarette and raised his hands in surrender. "Clear," Ben called, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through them. The squad formed a defensive circle as Avi knelt to secure the disarmed insurgents. His hands moved swiftly, tying the zip ties with practiced ease. The smell of smoke and burnt ozone hung heavy in the air, mingling with the faint copper tang of blood. Avi straightened, brushing dirt from his gloves. "Smoking on duty," he muttered, shaking his head. "Rookie mistake." Ben chuckled, the tension easing slightly. "Guess they didn't get the memo about the no-smoking zone." David stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Focus. We're not done yet. This was just one section. We keep moving." The squad pressed on, their boots crunching over debris as they cleared the remaining passages. They found evidence of recent activity: discarded crates, a half-eaten meal, a crude sleeping area littered with blankets and empty water bottles. The tension in the air remained thick, every shadow a potential threat. As they emerged from the tunnel hours later, the pre-afternoon light bathed the landscape in a soft, golden glow. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long, gentle shadows that stretched across the rocky terrain. The warmth was immediate, wrapping around the soldiers like a reassuring embrace after the cold, damp confines of the earth below. The men moved with purpose, their boots crunching on loose gravel as they regrouped near the vehicle. Despite their steady pace, there was a noticeable ease in their posture, a collective release of tension that had built up during the operation. They'd earned this moment, and though their work wasn't over, the weight of the unknown felt a little lighter now. David took a swig from his canteen, wiping sweat from his brow as he glanced back at the tunnel entrance. The hum of the equipment still faintly pulsed behind them, a steady reminder of the ground they'd covered. Ben leaned against the hood of the Jeep, tilting his head back to let the sun warm his face, his rifle resting across his lap. "Sun feels good," Avi muttered, stretching his stiff shoulders. He rolled his neck, the lingering ache from hours underground slowly ebbing away. David gave a small nod of agreement. The squad exchanged brief glances, a silent understanding passing between them. There was more work ahead, always more, but for now, they had the light, the warmth, and the satisfaction of a job well done. Nearby, a tech team was already at work setting up infrared cameras at the tunnel entrance. The small, sophisticated units would monitor any future movement, sending instant alerts to the base if the tunnel was used again. One of the techs handed David a tablet, showing the live feed. These cameras will catch even the smallest heat signature, the tech explained. We've also rigged motion sensors to cover the perimeter. Nothing's getting through without us knowing. David nodded approvingly. Good work. Make sure it's fully operational before we move on. Another team worked methodically to cover the exposed entrance, blending it back into the desert terrain. Within minutes, the tunnel looked untouched, a ghost of its former danger. As the squad prepared to leave, David took one last look at the site. We've done our part here, he said quietly. Now it's up to the next team to finish what we started. The soldiers climbed into their transport vehicle, the engine rumbling to life. Dust billowed behind them as they headed toward their next mission, leaving the hidden front lines carefully secured in their wake.